Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a book talk all about The Hidden Oracle by Rick Riordan. This is the first book in what's going to be a 5-book series that follows Apollo around as he is cast down as a mortal and he's trying to gain his godlyhood back. This first book follows Apollo right after he's cast down to Earth as a mortal by Zeus, and he tries to kind of figure out what's going on and how he can gain his godly status back. He meets a demigod, Meg, who accompanies him on this journey, and the two of them go to Camp Half-Blood together and have to deal with the craziness that's going on there. I really enjoyed this book, though admittedly it wasn't my favorite Rick Riordan book that's ever come out. It wasn't that it was bad or anything, I really did like it, it was just that I don't know, it didn't have the same kind of spark as some of his other books did to me. That being said, I think it was because it's his first book in what's going to be a 5-book series, so there was just a lot of foundation laying in this book. There was a bunch of information dumps for the readers, so it wasn't able to be quite as magical and they didn't go as quite intense of a journey, but I'm sure the next book they will, and it was still a really enjoyable read. My favorite part of this book was definitely the humor in it. I mentioned this in my last video, but this book was hilarious. And it was funny in a different way than Rick's books usually are. I mean, they're always funny, don't get me wrong, but this one in specific was so funny because it was in the perspective of Apollo, who is a god, but he's immortal in this book, and so he just looks down upon everybody around him, and he's so dramatic and sarcastic, and he just thinks he's so much better than everyone else, and it's really funny to see him proved wrong and him just being appalled that he actually is equal to everyone else. I also really love the historical references that happen in this book. I mean, because Apollo is a 4,000-year-old god, he's lived through a lot of things, and so he always kind of references this or references that, and there were so many things in the book that I laughed at so much. There was a part where he talks about basically breaking up the Beatles and that being one of his worst, regrets in life. And I laughed so hard because I'm such a Beatles fan. So I just loved how Rick was able to do that and kind of just throw in all these historical references, and I learned so much because of that. His books are always great for learning. I remember even that from, the first Percy Jackson series, because you learn so much about Greek mythology, and the same is true for this one. I feel like you're able to learn a lot more about Greek mythology in this one that you've never had the access to before because you're seeing it from a god's perspective, so he's kind of talking about the other gods like equals, which is not something you see, and it was really funny, and it was the part of the book that really made it stand out to me and why I really enjoyed it, because if it weren't for the humor, I don't know if it would have been my favorite book ever. Now for Meg. Meg is kind of the companion of Apollo. Basically, he is I don't want to say a servant to her, but she kind of enlists his help and he has to do whatever she says because that's how his mortal being works. That's how he is to prove that he's worthy of being a god, is by doing tasks that Meg sets out for him to do. And I really liked Meg. She was such a different and complex character. I feel like we've never seen anything like her before from Rick Riordan's books. She's so kick-ass, she's so funny because of just the way that she is so nonchalant about things. She doesn't really care about the same things Apollo does. She doesn't see the same levity to the situations they're in, but she also has a really dark side that gets to come out in this book, where, you see her past and she has a really complex and dark past, and you see her kind of working through that. I just really liked her character and I'm really excited to see what else is in store for her. But yeah, guys, that's kind of all I can say about this book without giving away too many spoilery details. Like I said, there's so much just plot building and so many foundational things that I feel like if you haven't read this book, I can't talk to you about it a whole bunch yet. Also, if you haven't read his other series, don't read this book. Unless you don't care about being spoiled about the first 2 series in the Percy Jackson world, don't read this book yet because it will spoil literally the 5-10 books that came before it. If you guys haven't read this book yet and you want to before you hear any spoilery details, then please go read it and then come back and talk to me about what you thought. I'm very excited to get into the spoilery discussion. Okay, so this book first starts out with Apollo falling from the heavens and he lands in a dumpster. And I thought that was so just such a good representation of the situation he's found himself in. I loved the first scene so much, especially when Meg comes and saves Apollo. I mean, can you imagine a better way to introduce a character, a god falling into a dumpster and, a mortal kicking butt and saving him? That's a great way. That's a wonderful way of starting a book. Now, I don't know if it was just me, but I didn't really notice that Meg was wielding fruits to kick these guys' butts, these like hooligans who were mugging Apollo. I didn't notice that she was using fruit. I mean, obviously, like, I read it and I saw that it was fruit, but I wasn't thinking that she had anything to do with that. Then she goes and gets his help and kind of enlists his servitude, I don't know what to call it, you know, his help. And the two of them go and they find Percy Jackson, who helps them get to Camp Half-Blood, and on the way, that's when you kind of really see Meg come out of her shell. It's not really until the battle with the Plague Spirits that you really get to see Meg and her powers really fully out there, you know, and so she's like throwing fruits around, and then Peaches comes to her help. I love Peaches, by the way. I think he's such a cute character. I love how angry and protective he is of Meg, and I think it shows so much about her that she's able to, you know, summon this grain spirit that we've seen that they're not very nice creatures in the past books. I really had no idea who her parents were, though. It wasn't until they got to Camp Half-Blood and she's actually claimed by Demeter that I was like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Another thing about Meg, when she fights with those like swords that are Roman swords, again, I don't know if I was just slow when I was reading this portion of the book, but I didn't even think that that was weird. Obviously it's weird. Looking back on it, I should have been like, a Greek demigod fighting with Roman weapons. That's not right. That's weird. That's suspicious. But I didn't even think about it. Right when we get into camp, we basically get this huge information dump where we find out that the prophecies still aren't working, the camp can't contact anybody, and that campers are going missing. So obviously things are going pretty bad. And Apollo, of course, is just like, oh, okay, well that's bad. But let's focus on me really quick. What I really did like about this whole time was that you got to see Nico and Will. I'm so happy. In the last book, we kind of were hinted that Nico and Will might be a thing, that Will might like Nico back, and I was really hoping that that would work out, obviously, but in this book you get to see the relationship and how sweet it is, and how happy Nico is. I'm so glad that we actually get to see him being happy and actually interacting with other campers, because that's not something he would ever do. Like, he would always stand on the outskirts, and in this book you get to see him sitting at dinner with everyone and actually like talking to other people, and I loved that, and I'm so happy that we got to see his character grow and be the person that we always wanted him to be for the past 10 books. So then there's this three-legged death race through the labyrinth, and can I just say, what a stupid idea that is. Why would they go? When campers are missing, like, you're constantly losing people, then they're gonna go into a death race in the labyrinth. Really? And not only that, the labyrinth goes underneath the forest where everybody is being lost. That's such a bad idea. Anyway, so of course this is a bad idea. Of course bad things happen in the labyrinth. Apollo and Meg end up underneath Delphi, and they hear Python, who's Apollo's like enemy, nemesis, and they hear the beast, which Meg is terrified of, which is suspicious. And you hear them planning basically Apollo's destruction, and they're talking about having a well-placed helper in camp. And so all this happens, and they're both freaked out and they're both worried, and they get back to camp, and guess what happened? People are missing, of course. Apollo's children are missing. I mean, is that a surprise, really? I mean, you knew something bad was gonna happen if you went into the labyrinth. Of course, Apollo wants to go and save his children, and I have to say, I really like that part, because I feel like this was the start of Apollo kind of becoming more mortal, and to see how he is starting to appreciate human lives and his children, and he's starting to feel guilt over not really caring about his children as much, even though they've shown him so much care and love when he's going through a hard time. Now, before Apollo and Meg go to save Kayla and Austin, Rachel Dare comes back, and she basically tells them that there's this sketchy triumvirate. I have no idea how to say it. These three guys have huge control over the entire world, basically, and they have a bunch of money, and they might actually be behind the Titans Rising and Gia Rising in the last series, which I have some issues with this. I know that, you know, they're trying to make it seem like this is an even bigger bad guy, and these are even worse than the last series, and oh my gosh, you know, but are demigods really worse than Gia, than the mother goddess? I don't know about that. We'll see. Maybe I'll be convinced in the next books and really see how terrible they are. but that was just kind of a hard one to sell me on. I'm not convinced yet. You find out about all this and you're like, oh shoot, okay, so we now know who the enemy is. We now know that Apollo has to go to the Grove of Dodona and try and save those trees from the beast. So Apollo and Meg head out into the forest and they meet a geyser god, and then they get attacked by these ants, and Meg is taken away by the ants, and Apollo makes a really dumb pledge once more. He swears to go and save Meg and to not let her die, basically, and it's on his life. So he's just making bad decision after bad decision. He goes, he saves Meg, and then they get to the Grove of Dodona. They're at the gates, and guess who shows up? Nero shows up. Of course Nero shows up, and guess who is on his side? Meg. Of course. I had kind of seen this coming for a little while now. I was like, I don't know, she's a little suspicious. She's the only person that is mysterious and that has issues that we don't really know about at this point. And so she seemed kind of like the obvious candidate, but then we kept seeing nice parts of her, and she kept saving Apollo and caring about him, so it was hard to see if she really was evil. And I think that Rick did a really good job of kind of portraying her as both good and bad, where she was siding with Nero because she had a really torn up past and she had to deal with really terrible things, and I liked that he showed that while also showing that she was a good person and she had good intentions. She's just scarred and she's dealt with really terrible things and abuse in her past, and so she's confused and she doesn't know what to believe. So the rest of the book goes by pretty fast from there. Basically, Apollo saves the Grove of Dodona, Meg leaves, and then he goes and tries to save Camp Half-Blood as it's being attacked by this ginormous statue of Nero, and Percy comes back and he helps, and they win, and then Leo comes back with Calypso, and I really loved seeing Leo and Calypso. I'm really excited to see what's in store for them because we didn't get to see much of him. So then Apollo kind of goes and he realizes he has to go and save the other oracles, and Leo and Calypso agree to go help him. So that's kind of where the book ends off. I have a lot of faith in the next book. I think it's going to be really good. We're going to see more of the classic struggle and journey that we usually see in these books. This one wasn't quite as, epic. I'm very excited to see what's going to happen, how the characters are going to progress, what's going to happen to Meg. Like, is she going to come back next book? Are we not going to see her for a little bit? What's going to happen with that whole relationship? I'm really excited to see Leo and Calypso kind of hash things out. I have a feeling Calypso isn't going to make it long. Not like she's going to die, but if she's mortal and Apollo's mortal, you can't have two mortals on a trip to go save things. There's only one demigod in that group? I don't think so. I feel like something's gonna happen there. Maybe Calypso will have powers back. I don't know, but it just seems like a really weak team if there are two mortals. I really loved Apollo's transformation in this book. I loved how he went from this egotistical godlike self where he didn't really care about anyone else, he didn't really understand anyone's struggles, and he only wanted to talk about himself, to the point where he started feeling bad about even worrying about himself. He cared so much about his children and his relationships with them and with Meg, and I loved that transformation. I loved how much he became a caring person, and while he still was his funny self and he still had his ego about him, he wasn't as about himself as he was before. I'm really excited to see where the rest of these books go, how the characters change. I know it's going to be 5 books, so I'm very excited to see kind of how everyone evolves and what's going to happen there. I can't wait to see if we get to meet more characters and who we get to see again. Overall, I really did like this book. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really funny, a really good read, and I'm very excited for the next books. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm gonna leave my links down below. I have Goodreads and I started an Instagram. I've only posted like one thing though, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon with another video. Bye!